Colin felt under pressure, literally. Movement was impossible, and he could only breathe shallowly through the holes cut in the mouth and nose. He felt like he was sweating, but it wasn't hot inside the mold, just uncomfortable as his body was compressed to fill the mold exactly. His groin felt odd, too, as the mold pressed into him, trying its best to replicate the appearance of a female form. Somehow, he knew his body was lining up so that his natural features fit into the mold's impressions. Ted saw a clear fluid leaking from the join in the mold and hurriedly collected a sample, thinking it could be important to find out what it was. He theorized it might be excess fluid that had initially been compressed into the body cavities like the lungs and stomach. He wondered if the body was resetting itself, ridding itself of the unwanted excess flesh in the form of liquid, temporarily stored in the body so that it could function normally again. After waiting for about half an hour, Ted noticed that the liquid had stopped leaking out. "Looks like you're all set now," joked Ted to the silent, mold-encapsulated figure. "GGNNNNN, was the strained grunt in reply. "Okay, hold your horses, I'll let you out," Ted promised. Releasing all the clips that held the mold together, Ted eased one half off the now freshly molded Beth. So tightly was she pressed into the other half, she needed Ted's help to extract herself. "Oh my God! You're amazing," Ted exclaimed in wonder. Beth looked herself over before heading into the bathroom for a better look, with Ted right behind her. She closed the door in his face, saying she wanted some privacy. Ted sighed, seeing Beth, or Colin as Beth, had rekindled the feelings he had had for the real Beth, some months before when they'd been dating. Recalling his memories and seeing her again in the flesh, he suddenly realized that he had loved her. Then an awful thought came to him, making him pause. Was he really trying to help Colin get a real identity, or was it just wishful thinking on his part to get back with this duplicate of Beth? At the moment, with his rising feelings for Beth's new form, he couldn't honestly say his motives were pure. Feeling conflicted, he went into his bedroom to sit in a funk of self-doubt. How was he to face Colin now, as Beth? He would be seeing his Beth, someone he loved, not his old friend. He wished things hadn't turned out the way they did. Beth hadn't wanted a serious relationship, so Ted had broken it off, before putting too much commitment into a relationship that was doomed to fail. Colin was in awe of the image in the mirror. Her body was perfect. All that was needed to complete the look was to have her hair cut and styled in a similar manner. Fortunately, both Beth and Colin had the same dark hair. Looking like Beth in the mirror started to turn herself on. Herself? Colin thought in shock. When did I start thinking of myself in the feminine? She wondered. Thinking about it, she realized that when you look like a woman and sound like one, it plays a big part in how you perceive yourself, especially with the way Ted had been treating her. Trying to push aside a niggling little voice telling her that she might end up enjoying this, if it was to go on for an extended period of time, Colin decided to try and get herself into a Beth mindset. That way, she figured, there was less possibility of being caught out and end up landing both Ted and her in deep trouble. Beth, as she began calling herself, accepting the change of name as inevitable, began to get dressed. Looking at her exquisite body dressed in the sexy lingerie she had selected from the suitcase, was turning her on, and she could feel a little warmth gathering in her body. She started to massage her body in a comforting way, feeling the transformation more and more. Guessing it was just the natural reaction to her changed body, she tried to relax and focus on the task ahead. Thinking about how to style it for the moment, Beth got a brush and started to brush her hair, a practice she had as Colin when she needed to relax. Brushing was soothing, and soon, the hair was shining and silky. After looking in the suitcase for some hair clips, she spotted a hairband, which she used to hold her hair back while giving her bangs at the front. Opening the makeup case again, she tried being more adventurous. Experimenting with eyeshadow and blush, she found that too much made her look overdone. As she started to clean it off, she saw that with just a hint of eyeshadow left, even though it was smudged from her rubbing, it looked much better. Learning that all-important lesson, less was more. She started over. This time, when she finished, she smiled in satisfaction. It wasn't perfect, but for a first time, it was more than acceptable. Jewelry followed. After putting in some drop earrings, the feeling as they moved around and pulled at her ears made her extremely aware of them. A plain gold chain around her neck felt cool and heavy as it rested on her chest. Finding a delicate watch, she put it on her tiny wrist and slipped some bangles on her wrists as well. The way they clinked against each other and slid up and down her wrists made her alter the way she moved her hands. Afraid they might slip off, she took extra care to move her hands in a more graceful fashion. No more sudden, sharp hand gestures. She thought the bangles might help curb her movements into a more graceful habit. Checking the time, she gasped. Hours had passed. What was Ted thinking? She wondered why he hadn't knocked on her door asking what she was doing. Spraying a little perfume on her neck and chest, she paused, wondering why she had sprayed there. Did she expect Ted to be closer to her than she thought? Hoping it was just because she knew women usually applied perfume there, she stepped out of the room and went into the lounge. Ted wasn't there, and looking around into the kitchen, she could see no sign of him. Puzzled, she went to his bedroom door, listening there before knocking. She called out softly in her new voice, wondering if Ted was asleep. Silence answered her, and she grew worried. Opening the door an inch, she peered in. Ted was sitting on his bed, his head in his hands. Beth opened the door and walked in, her heels clicking crisply on the wooden floor. Ted looked up, his red, tear-stained eyes taking in the sight of Beth standing there, with a concerned look in her eyes. He sobbed and flung himself prone on the bed, trying to get the image of her perfection out of his mind. Ted! What is the matter? Why are you upset? Have I done something wrong? Beth gasped as she went to sit next to Ted on the bed. No! Please go away, sobbed Ted, trying to turn away. Ted was Beth's only word, as she tried to figure out what was wrong. She was shocked by his reaction when she touched his shoulder with her hand in an attempt to get him to face her. Ted leapt up as if terrified and ran out of the room. Beth was stunned. She sat there, wondering what had happened since she had last seen him. Following him belatedly, she found him locked in the bathroom. He wouldn't answer her or open the door until she threatened to call emergency services, saying she thought Ted was in trouble. A minute passed, and Beth started to walk away to the phone. Her clicking heels announced to Ted that she was serious. Ted called out, saying he was coming out, so Beth stopped and waited. Ted came slowly out, looking distraught. Beth took his hand and guided him to the sofa in the lounge, then went to get 2 stiff drinks for them both. Please, Ted, tell me what's wrong, Beth urged, cradling her drink. You'll hate me, and looking like that, I can't stand to have you hate me, mumbled Ted, nearly downing the drink in one gulp. No, I won't hate you. I promise, Beth said, meaning every word. Wait till you hear what I have to say before making promises you can't keep, Ted sighed, finishing the drink, and then getting another. I have a confession. When I broke up with Beth, it wasn't because we were incompatible. Beth didn't want a serious relationship at that time, but I did. I wanted a commitment she couldn't give, so I broke it off, not wanting to waste time on a relationship that wasn't going anywhere. So you broke up with Beth, so what has that to do with anything? Asked Beth, curiously. I didn't realize it until seeing you now, but I'm still in love with Beth, at least I was. Seeing you as Beth just made things clear, Ted explained. Oh. I see, was Beth's only comment. No, you don't. You see, I think my plan to have you look like Beth was some unconscious attempt to bring her back. My motives are suspect. I think I was being selfish and not thinking of how it would affect you to live here with me, seeing the person I loved. I'm a self-serving fool, and I'm sorry if I've hurt our friendship by acting on some wish fulfillment fantasy. How can I look at you and still see my old friend Colin? When I look at you, I want to hold you and make meaningful connections. This changes everything. Ted. Let me think about this for a minute, Beth pleaded, unconsciously touching Ted's arm in reassurance. Ted lifted his head and looked longingly at the image of his lost love. Ted, you say you love Beth, but now that I'm her double, that love has transferred to me? At his nod, she continued, so even knowing I'm a man inside this body, doesn't change that feeling? No, it doesn't. I think it's best if I drive you to Beth's place for now, so you won't be a constant distraction to my confused emotions. Hey! Don't I get a say in this? I mean, this is a shock, but I think I can handle it. I'm not attracted to men, at least I wasn't as Colin. Somehow now, I'm not so sure, Beth admitted, trying to sort her feelings out. The memory of her recent personal exploration was coloring her thoughts, and a strange new curiosity about her own identity was beginning to emerge. You've always been there for me in the past, and now you've given me a new perspective. Maybe I never thought about my feelings until I saw her, me in the flesh, as it were. Am I right? Beth asked, looking directly into Ted's eyes. No, you're right. I didn't. You don't hate me then, old buddy? Ted asked, relief washing over him. Beth, without really thinking about it, leaned over and went to kiss Ted on the cheek. Somehow, it didn't feel like an act of romance, just the natural thing to do. Ted, sensing that Beth was leaning toward him, turned his head to look. At that moment, Beth's lips met Ted's for a fleeting second. It was Colin who pulled back, blushing, as his mind reeled in shock. What was he thinking? Here he was, kissing his best friend after just a day of wearing feminine clothes. Confused, he sat back, lost in his own thoughts. Ted, too, pulled back in surprise at the sudden contact with Beth's lips. He saw the confusion in his best friend's face as she sat back, eyes unfocused, as if struggling to make sense of her feelings. Ted wisely didn't press her for an explanation and kept a neutral expression on his face, so Beth wouldn't feel embarrassed. Colin's thoughts were still rather mixed. While looking like Beth, dressed in her clothes, feeling and smelling everything she would have felt from the earrings and perfume, not to mention the way the clothes caressed this body, acting like Beth seemed a natural progression. It was an unconscious impulse to give Ted a peck on the cheek. Beth had reacted like the woman she looked like. There were no romantic thoughts of kissing Ted, just a woman offering comfort to a troubled man. What was confusing was the effect that occurred when Ted's lips met hers. Instead of the expected discomfort of a man kissing another man, there seemed to be a spark of something that made her want to repeat it. No. I can't be thinking like that. Ted would think I'm strange, a completely different person. Oh God, what do I do now? She thought, starting to tear up. Ted moved closer to Beth, seeing his vision of Beth sitting tensed up beside him. He slowly put an arm over her shoulder and started to pull her gently nearer, prepared to stop if she resisted. He was pleasantly surprised to feel her yield. Suddenly she collapsed into his arms, sobbing. Ted held her close, doing no more than stroking her back reassuringly, as she struggled to compose herself. He guessed that the kiss, although started by her, wasn't meant to be on his lips, and she didn't know how he would take it. To Ted, there was no conflict. To be kissed, even by accident, by the image of his lost love, felt good. Knowing it was really Colin inside that body only excited him. If she had been willing, he'd have loved to have held her close and shown her how much he cared. You okay? Ted asked solicitously. Was Beth's muffled answer. Look, it's okay, it was an accident, it won't ever happen again, Ted continued, hoping against hope that it would. He wanted desperately to add, unless you want it to, but wisely, it remained unsaid. Look, let's forget it happened, okay? We need to push ahead with our plans. You have a big day tomorrow. Let's go over what we're going to do, then get a good night's rest. Just then, Maggie, who had been sitting patiently waiting for some attention, saw Beth's comfortable and currently unoccupied lap. She jumped up and landed sure-footed, right in the spot she wanted. Purring loudly, she announced her arrival and awaited the attention she was sure to get. The sudden arrival of a purring, four-legged ball of fur was just the distraction Beth and Ted needed. Beth stroked the kitten's fur, which brought the purring level up a decibel or two. Ted laughed and stroked the kitten as well, just to be companionable. Their hands touched each other's as they moved along the kitten's back. Ted was suddenly left with Beth's hand under his as Maggie decided she wanted to go outside, and vacated Beth's lap. Taking his cue, Ted stood up and, still holding her hand, helped Beth stand before letting go to see to Maggie's needs. Beth was still a bit overwhelmed being treated as a woman by Ted, but decided to accept it as a courtesy and not read any deeper meaning into it. Tomorrow was going to be stressful enough without any added complications. Beth chose to wear one of the nightgowns Ted had selected from the original Beth's house. She thought it was appropriate, seeing her body had the right shape, plus the sensation on her skin when she put it on was more than compensation for any thoughts of it being too delicate. As it floated down over her head, she shivered. Nothing she had ever worn in her life had felt so nice. Sleep came surprisingly easy, and soon she was having several dreams featuring Ted as her boyfriend. As is usually the case in dreams, where the illogical seems logical, seeing herself as a woman and being intimate with a man didn't trigger any objections. In fact, everything seemed perfectly normal. She didn't even wake as a small furred person oozed under the closed door and hopped onto the bed, making itself comfortable on her slowly breathing body. Ted tossed and turned that night, knowing that just a room away was his true love, albeit having been artificially recreated. He'd noticed the change in Colin as soon as he had transformed into Beth. Her manner was definitely more feminine, although why that should be, he could only conjecture. Beth woke refreshed and proceeded to get a shower and then get dressed. She lingered in the shower, experiencing having breasts to wash. It still felt odd not to have anything between her legs, but it did make it easier to clean there. Her legs were still as smooth as when she first pulled the dried residue off her skin, a process that had removed nearly all of her body hair. Her face was without its usual stubble, and she wondered if this would be a permanent thing. Not having to shave was a blessing in disguise, even if it meant having no hair anywhere else below her eyes. Getting out before she used all the hot water, Beth dried her body and went back to get dressed. Ted had asked her to put on the dress she had been rescued in, but it was rather dirty, and she wasn't going to a salon in that, while her hair was being styled into a copy of the real Beth's. She selected a fresh set of underwear in a soft pink color. The panties were in a high-cut style and felt odd at first, but she had the hips for it, and they did look nice. The matching bra was also slightly different from the one she wore yesterday. It was lighter and semi-sheer with lace at the top of the cups. Out of curiosity, she checked the label near the closure and saw she took a 38C size bra. Beth didn't want to linger in just her underwear, as it was very distracting to see the well-dressed woman reflected in the mirror. She found a simple skirt and blouse combo that seemed to work, although she was by no means an expert in coordinating clothes. Even as a man, she wasn't renowned for having style. While Beth was finishing getting dressed, Ted had woken up feeling tired. He trudged into the shower, hoping to feel more awake by the time he finished. Beth, meanwhile, had heard the shower going and had made her way to the kitchen to make some breakfast. Putting coffee on to brew, she was well into making bacon and eggs when Ted walked in, sniffing. Something smells good, anything I can do to help?" he offered, rubbing his hands appreciatively. "No, I have everything under control, but you can set the places and warm the plates in the oven, if you like," Beth answered, without taking her eyes off the eggs. "Okay, no problem." With that, Ted got the plates out to warm in the oven, then set up the cutlery and salt and pepper, not forgetting to get out the ketchup for the eggs. Beth walked out with some slices of bread before returning to bring out the plates of food. They both sat down to eat, enjoying the food quietly, too hungry to make conversation until they sat with their cups of coffee. "That was nice," Ted complimented Beth, rubbing his now full stomach. "Thank you for cooking breakfast, but you didn't have to," he added. After breakfast was cleared away, Ted drove both Beth and Maggie to get her hair styled. Maggie made such a fuss about being left behind that Ted decided it was easier to allow the kitten along. Driving to a beauty parlor about an hour away might have seemed excessive, but Ted didn't want anyone to recognize Beth, or the reason she needed to have her hair styled back to what it should have already looked like. Ted had a recent photo of the original Beth, which showed her hair as it was on the day she passed. By asking the stylist to recreate that style, they could then proceed to the next step. Beth went in while Ted waited in the car around the corner. Having one's hair treated in a salon was a real experience for the newly minted Beth. First, getting it shampooed and having someone massage her scalp was very soothing and satisfying. Beth was sorry when it was finished and the hair was wrapped while she was moved to the cutting chair. Beth tried to keep up the usual salon chit-chat, but as she started to relax, she began to enjoy the fuss as her hair was combed, clipped, snipped, and styled. Finally, as she looked in the mirror, all she saw was Beth, perfectly recreated. Later on the drive home, Ted went over the plan. Stopping off at Beth's home, she changed into the dirted and torn dress worn yesterday at the facility. Musing her freshly styled hair and smudging her face with grime, she looked consistent with having been through the explosion and the resulting rescue. Ted had contacted the police several times to check the progress of the search for Beth, or her body. He dropped Beth off just outside the current search grid and continued to the police's temporary search center. Acting the concerned friend, Ted volunteered to help, but was told he was still under suspicion for the disappearance of Beth's body, and his help was rejected. Ted, unfazed by the accusations, hovered nearby in full view of the searching police. About 10 minutes later, an excited officer was heard over the radio, saying he had located the woman and that she was alive. The officer in charge seemed shocked but came over to Ted and informed him of the news. Ted asked to see Beth as a familiar face might be welcomed. The officer agreed and apologized to Ted for casting suspicion on him. Ted waved it off, saying he'd probably have suspected himself too, if he'd been in the officer's shoes. It wasn't long before Beth was brought to the search center, where an ambulance was still on standby. Beth looked suitably dazed and confused, holding the kitten in her arms. When asked where she had been, she looked blank and mumbled that she'd been knocked unconscious, and the next thing she knew, she woke up in the ambulance. She had heard the kitten and had scrambled out to find it. She added that some of her memories seemed affected, and she started to weep. A medic looked her over, checking her pulse and blood pressure, and then looked in each eye, checking her pupils. Shrugging, he indicated that she looked okay but could be suffering from selective memory loss due to the trauma. He stepped back, allowing the questioning to continue. Nobody doubted that Beth was the dazed and confused woman they had been searching for. Getting little information from her, Ted interrupted, saying that Beth was his girlfriend and partner, and he wanted to take her to the hospital for a head x-ray. Beth's eyes flickered when Ted mentioned their relationship. The police officer saw it and got a nagging suspicion. He asked Beth if she was in a romantic relationship with Ted, to which she mumbled, yes. The officer still wasn't certain that she was telling the truth and thought she might be hiding something, but he had nothing concrete to go on, just his instincts. He agreed to let them go. He did mention that they should stay available in case anything else came up. Your partner? Why did you say that, you idiot? Now I have to live up to being all affectionate with you in public, Beth steamed, as Ted drove her to the hospital. I'm sorry, but I had to show them we were more than just colleagues. Plus, we did share an intimate connection not that long ago, offered a contrite Ted. They wouldn't have allowed us to leave together if there wasn't a close bond between us. At least we get one test out of the way without any suspicions. The X-ray? Yes, we need to see if they find any abnormalities. Hopefully, it may give us a clue, Ted explained. Do you think the police bought our story? He seemed a little suspicious when you mentioned us being partners. What if he puts a tail on us or keeps us under surveillance? Beth asked worriedly. He did seem a bit hesitant, I must admit. Hopefully, he'll close the investigation soon, and we can stop acting like we are in love.